This is the first of two presentations about virtual machines, an essential topic when setting up test and development environments. Everything we will do relies heavily on virtual machines, so we need at least to have a good understanding of the basics. In the first part, I will cover the most common hypervisors and my experience with each. Then, I will briefly explain the different types of virtual networks. In the end, I will take you to the point where you will have a virtual machine ready to install the operating system. In the second part, we will install Microsoft Windows and remove all the unnecessary software. Then, we will make some tweaks to get the virtual machine ready to install third-party software related to the industrial control systems, for example, to program a PLC. By the end of the first part of this presentation, you will get to know hypervisors and how networks are implemented in a virtual environment. Then, we will cover the virtual hardware configurations and create a virtual machine ready to install the operating system. A hypervisor is a software that allows us to run virtual machines. The computer that runs the hypervisor is called the host machine, while the virtual machines are referred to as guests. There are two types of hypervisors, Type 1 and Type 2. Type 1 hypervisors are installed directly on the host machine and provide the platform to create and run virtual machines. Type 2 hypervisors are installed on a machine that already runs an operating system. For that reason, we can have more than one Type 2 hypervisor running on the same machine. For example, I currently have VirtualBox and VMware Workstation running on my laptop without any problems. I will consider three hypervisors: Oracle VirtualBox, VMware Workstation, and Microsoft Hyper-V. I will share my experience with each hypervisor regarding the following aspects: performance, network management, management of the files that support the virtual machine, virtual disks maintenance, and USB pass-through. What I am about to say is not an accurate technical comparison, but merely my perception resulting from trying them all. Looking at the performance, and by performance I mean how smoothly and fast the guest operating system and software runs, VMware and Hyper-V have the edge over VirtualBox. Regarding the management of virtual networks, VirtualBox and VMware entail similar functionalities, all supported by an intuitive graphical interface. Hyper-V, however, although everything is configured using a graphical interface, virtual networks are too entangled with the real networks, making them difficult to maintain. Each virtual machine is supported by several files. At least for me, it is critical to have the virtual machines completely segregated in the disk. This means to have the files that support one virtual machine completely separated from files related to other virtual machines. Here, Hyper-V doesn't do a good job, and I ended up having in the same folder files from several machines. VirtualBox and VMware are good in this regard, but VirtualBox wins because it is possible to create folders or groups in the user interface with a direct consequence on the file structure on the disk. This is something that has to be managed manually if we use VMware. Although I always use dynamically allocated disks, very easily disk files become too big beyond what is strictly needed. This happens usually during software installation, when the disk grows to accommodate both installed software and temporary files used during the installation. Because of this, one important functionality is to be able to compact the disk sizes to the strictly necessary size. The winner here is VMware, due to how easy this is achieved on the user interface, in contrast with VirtualBox, which requires running some commands using a command line interface. For some applications, USB pass-through is an important functionality. USB pass-through allows a USB device, connected to the host machine, to be virtually disconnected from there, and virtually connected to the virtual machine. This functionality is not supported by Hyper-V. VirtualBox is the winner because an automatic pass-through can be configured as part of the virtual machine configuration. In VMware, it is required to manually edit the virtual machine configuration file to achieve the same purpose. So, looking at this comparison, I will discard Hyper-V. Also, network management, a topic I will discuss next, is very similar in VirtualBox and VMware, which strengthens my decision to leave Hyper-V at bay. I'm currently using VMware Workstation after spending several years using VirtualBox. I made this transition mainly because of the best performance, but this decision came with a license cost. If you intend to keep your expenditure to a minimum, there is no reason to not choose VirtualBox. Feel free to choose VirtualBox or VMware. I will cover both. I will cover 3 types of virtual networks: host-only, bridge, and NAT. As the name tells us, this network is intended to provide a communication path between the host machine and the virtual machines. However, when running multiple virtual machines, a host-only network will also provide connectivity between those machines. This is the network I use to keep virtual machines segregated from local networks and the Internet. The bridge network uses the host machine network interface, making it virtually available to the guest machines. The virtual machines will be connected to the network like the host is. Consequently, several IP addresses will be assigned, if using DHCP, one to the host machine and then one to each guest machine. If the host network interface is used to access the Internet, the virtual machines will also have access to the Internet. This network is my choice when connecting to local networks. For example, if I intend to program a PLC from the virtual machine, I will likely have a bridge connection, and the IP address configured manually. With NAT, the virtual machine will not be connected directly to the network but to a private network instead. The virtual machine will get its IP address from a virtual DHCP server. Addresses will be translated between the network where the host is connected and the virtual network to which the virtual machine is. This network is ideal to have the virtual machine connected to a local network or Internet while keeping it invisible from other devices on the same network. To summarize, host-only networks will be intended for scenarios where the traffic is kept between the host machine and virtual machines. Bridge connections are recommended to connect to devices on the network, and for this reason, it is the preferred connection method for industrial control systems. NAT, and its inherent characteristic to keep the virtual machine hidden from other devices, I use for Internet access and security research purposes. Now that we have an understanding of hypervisors and virtual networks, it is time to create a virtual machine. As I mentioned, I will demonstrate using VirtualBox and VMware Workstation. I will start with VMware. If you intend to use VirtualBox, please feel free to skip to the next section. For VMware Workstation, we need to download the installer from the VMware website. The direct link can be found in the video notes. You can run VMware Workstation Pro for 30 days, but you will need a license after that. So, let me show you an alternative, VMware Workstation Player. Workstation Player does not have all the functionalities Workstation Pro has. Let's see. Looking at the comparison, we can see that both have the same functionalities except snapshots, for example. The possibility to take snapshots is a very useful feature that allows to save the virtual machine state and return to it if something goes wrong. Continuing looking at the comparison, we can see that Workstation Player does not have the same flexibility as Workstation Pro to manage the virtual networks. Also, Workstation Pro offers some network simulation capabilities not available in Workstation Player. And that's it. So, if you just want to see what is running a virtual machine, go ahead with the free version, Workstation Player. However, if you plan to develop a proper test and development environment, I would recommend Workstation Pro. If the license cost is a problem, then Oracle VirtualBox will be the right option. Okay, I will download and use Workstation Pro. The installation steps and the creation of a virtual machine are very similar to Workstation Player. So, this will be for now a trial that will run for 30 days. And let's download. Download done. Let's now run the installer. Note that you will need administrative privileges on your computer for this installation. Next, let's accept the license agreement. We can accept these defaults. Here feel free to choose according to your preference. And let's install. Okay, software installed. Let's go to the Start menu. As you can see, we also have Workstation Player installed. Also, there is this virtual network editor that is used to configure the virtual networks, but that will be another video. Let's start Workstation Pro. Let's go with the trial period. And here it is, that's our hypervisor running. So, let's create our virtual machine. Let's use the typical configuration. Because we will not install the operating system now, I will choose the last option. Now, let's select Microsoft Windows and leave Windows 10 in the version. Next. Feel free to give it a name of your preference. Note where the files will be. Press Next. Now, this is the hard disk of the virtual machine. I would recommend using 100 GB and using a single file. And that's it. Our virtual machine is created. We just need to make a couple of tweaks. The first is the amount of memory. This will depend on how much memory your computer has. But I would recommend assigning at least 2048 megabytes. Here you can assign more processors, again, depending on how many cores you have available. And we can remove this virtual printer, it will avoid some annoying messages later. As you can see, the default virtual network type is NAT, and we will leave it for now. Here is the virtual machine CD/DVD drive. We will use this when installing the operating system. And that's all, the virtual machine has its hardware configured, and it is ready to install the operating system. Let's look at Oracle VirtualBox. On the home page of the VirtualBox website, you will find a link to download. I will assume that you are using a Windows machine, and for that reason, let's select Windows hosts. Since we are here, another thing we should download is the extension pack. Without the extension pack, you will have limited capabilities on your virtual machine. So, let's go ahead and download the extension pack as well. All done. We can close the browser. Please remember that you will need administrator privileges to install. Let's run the installer. We can accept all the defaults. And start the installation. Installation done. Let's allow VirtualBox to start after the installation. Now, we will install the extension pack. For that, let's go to the File menu and select Preferences. Let's go to the Extensions group, and add the extension pack downloaded a while ago. Press Open. Press Install. And that's it. All done. Our hypervisor, VirtualBox, is ready. Let's now create the virtual machine. For that, we go to the Machine menu and select New. Give it the name of your preference, and with Microsoft Windows selected, choose Windows 10 64-bit as version. Press Next. You can leave the default 2 GB or you can assign more memory. It will depend on how much memory you have available on your computer. Press Next. And now this is the virtual machine hard disk. Let's create one. We will use the default format. Now, this is an important setting. If you select fixed size, a file will be created, and its size will be the selected hard disk size. However, if you select dynamically allocated, although the virtual machine will see the disk size specified by you, the disk file will only grow in size according to its contents. This is my preferred option. This is where we define the disk size. I would recommend 100 GB. And the virtual machine is created. We just need to adjust a couple of settings. For that, let's press that Settings button. In the Advanced tab within the General group, let's select bidirectional on those 2 settings. This will allow to drag and drop files between the virtual and host machine, as well as copy and pasting. In the System group, you can assign more CPU cores to the virtual machine. This will also depend on how many cores you have available. In the Network group, you can see that the network type is NAT. We will leave it for now. In the Storage group, that's where you will find out the hard disk and the CD/DVD drive. This is where we will be back to install the operating system. And that's all, the virtual machine is ready. So, in this video, we introduced hypervisors and saw the differences between Type 1 and Type 2. We covered the 3 most used virtual networks and we left a virtual machine ready to install the operating system. And that's what we will be doing on the next video. We will see how to get an evaluation copy of the Microsoft Windows operating system and install it. Then we will remove all the unnecessary software and make some final tweaks to leave the virtual machine ready to use. If you found this video useful, I would love to have a coffee from you. Please go to ko-fi.com, that is, ko-fi.com/hardpath, and buy me one there. Also, please share this video, that would be highly appreciated. Feel free to reach me on social media. On LinkedIn, my profile can be found at this address. But it will be on Twitter that you will hear from me more often.